Hey, Glenn here. Welcome back to Monster Guitars. In this video, it was going to be all about some fairly mundane processes, just showing you that the old brass guitar, as I've called it, was progressing nicely and was going to be assembled in the relatively near future. And then disaster struck. And this video suddenly became all about whether or not I could fix things. And you'll find out whether or not I did if you keep watching. As is my habit, I route a cable channel in the body before I put the top on. But I didn't really think too much about where that cable would be in the pickup cavity, because it normally doesn't matter for me, because I have humbuckers that are suspended in rings or in a pick guard, which are not directly mounted on the body. But of course, if it's directly mounted on the body, then it matters where there is and isn't solid wood to screw into. So I took one of the mounting screws and put it through the mounting hole in the pickup just to see where it would land, and it's there. Now, I might be okay there, but over time, if for any reason someone removes the pickups and puts them back in a couple of times, there's always the possibility that they may break through there. So I've decided what I'm going to do is drill a hole there, a hole where the circle would overlap that channel somewhat, and then make a wooden plug and glue that in there, just to make sure there is plenty of surface area to screw into. So I've drilled a 10mm hole over where that indentation was, where I could see the hole was going to be. And now I've just got a scrap piece of Rimu and a 10mm plug cutter, and just like so. And now it is as easy as gluing in a plug. Roughly align the grain, although as I now realize it won't matter at all, but whatever. And that went all the way to the end with a solid stop. I don't even need to hammer that. Okay, so I will I'll let that glue dry, and then I'll just route that level with the rest of the cavity. Well, I've made a design decision. I'm not going to mount the controls in a scratch plate on the top. I originally wasn't going to, and then I thought maybe I would, but no, I've gone back to plan A. I will just mount the controls through a cavity in the back of the body. I think I'll prefer the simplicity of just having these brass components, the bridge and the controls, sitting on the wood. I think so, yeah. I do have well, it's called brass, I don't know what it's actually made of, a jack plate, because the output jack will be on the side of the body with the way that I've decided to go. But it was kind of new and shiny looking, which is, fine, but not for this guitar, because the brass parts that I'm going to be using look somewhat aged. So I've got the plate and the screws for the plate soaking, and I'll leave it soaking overnight in a solution of liver of sulfur, which smells like rotten eggs. I've used it in the past to age some copper, and that worked really well. Depending on what that metal actually is, it's brass colored. It may or may not work well, but I hope that at least by the time it's finished, or by the time I take it out, it will not look so new and shiny. So you can kind of, well, I think you can fairly clearly see the difference. Previously, this jack plate was, I think, pretty much the same color as that one. Much brighter, much shinier. Now it's a little bit duller, it looks older, which is great. So that liver of sulfur has really done what I hoped. I've clamped it now, and it makes a big difference. The reason there was so much wobbling going on is that the central spur or spike in this forcing bit had nothing to dig into, because I've already drilled the pilot hole all the way through the body where my knobs and switch will go. So there, more or less, is my control cavity. Doesn't really look like much of a control cavity, but what I've done is taken a 50mm Forstner and just made cavities where each controller will sit. There's a knob and a switch, and I will create a template to create a recess around that, and that is where the cover will sit. I can't even show my face. I may have destroyed this guitar completely. I set this router up last night to do the roundover on the underside of the body, and I told myself, look out for where you've drilled the output jack. You must remember to not route around that corner. I should have marked it, I should have taped it, but when I came to this guitar this morning, I completely forgot, and I just started routing around the body, and the bearing went into the output jack, and I cleanly, beautifully ruined this corner. I know that I can potentially do something to partially fix this. I could cut the corner off and glue on a new piece, but the original beauty of this guitar is gone forever. That's a very depressing, well, I'm not really depressed, but it's a frustrating end, possibly an end to this project, which was looking so promising. I may have to build a new one and replace it entirely. That smoke is from a blunt blade going through hard wood. But yeah, I am going to try and do something about this. Astute viewers will have noticed that I had glued the top layers onto the wrong side of the piece of emu. Why didn't you say something? Okay, well that's remedied now. So I'll let this dry, joint the edge, and then see if I can make this glue up work. So I've made the piece that will glue on. I've taken this from another piece with pretty much the same grain pattern as the piece that I used to make this top, and now it's going to be just a question of locating a fairly good match when it comes to the grain, because it's only going to be this very small corner down here that makes use of the additional piece of sapele, so it won't be hugely noticeable, but I want it to be as good as possible. And that, as far as grain alignment goes, that looks fairly good. I've got the replacement piece dry clamped on there. I don't want to be too optimistic about this given how much of a disaster this damage appeared to be, and the odds of it going perfectly are not amazing. However, I will cautiously say that it looks fairly good. There are no obvious gaps that I can see here. This piece of sapele, the new one, does appear to be slightly darker than this. However, it came from the same batch. I think the reason this looks darker is that it's just freshly been planed and resawn, so it looks fresh and dark. It will fade slightly, as this one has, once it's been exposed for much longer, like this one has. So I'm off now to pick up my grandson from childcare, but when I get back, I'm going to glue this up and we'll see how it goes. Well, from the top side, it looks pretty good, about as good as I would hope for in the circumstances. Let me just get down and have a look on the underside. Well, it's a bit hard to see exactly how good the joint is because the glue, of course, is running out on the underside. I am hoping for the best. Expecting not quite the best, not expecting the worst, but will it be good enough? I guess we'll find out soon. Well, it's the moment of truth. Maybe it's not quite the moment of truth. It's a bit early to see exactly how well this has gone. I'll need to shape it a bit and do some sanding to see how well the surfaces marry up. I should go over to the bandsaw and just cut off the obvious excess before I go any further. Well, as far as getting a piece nicely glued on goes, that has gone perfectly. Some difficulty matching things exactly, but I'll give it a few days, maybe even a week, before I really form an assessment on how well that colour will match. Now it looks much more obvious at the moment because the piece of sapele is fairly large, but that's going to be largely removed once we've done the routing here. The Rimu, well, that line there in the Rimu is always going to be, well, I say visible, not really unless you look at the back of the guitar on the bottom corner. But and again, this is going to look a bit different once we've processed things. So how about I just proceed for now? I'll get my body shaped template out again and I'll route this to shape, and then I'll put the bevel on the edge on the top and drill a hole. Imagine if I repeated this mistake all over again. Let's not do that. Now this is why I was saying earlier that I shouldn't celebrate prematurely and I should wait until everything is sanded and dressed up nicely before I comment on how well it went. The glue up went perfectly, but the alignment was just a little bit off, and it was I'm going to say it was a difficult task. It was a difficult task for me because, I'm not a woodworking genius, but just a couple of millimeters off is quite noticeable when you're dealing with small lines like that. Now I could say, well, this corner is deliberately different because it's going to have a hole right in the middle of it where the output jack is, so it's designed around that. In fact, anyone who's watched this video will know that's a lie. It could have been a lot worse, and I'm going to go ahead and finish the guitar using this body. Obviously, I wish I hadn't had this mishap. Well, do I wish that I hadn't had this mishap? Because it's very satisfying to successfully complete a repair like this, even just very well, not perfectly. And I did that very well, not perfectly though. Does that satisfaction, if we could measure satisfaction versus disappointment and frustration, would there be more of this satisfaction than there was of disappointment at having had the accident? I'm actually not sure, because I really enjoyed doing this repair. So it's hard to say on balance. As a customer buying the guitar, I would just prefer that it had never been damaged. And, that's probably a discount, that I won't charge as much as I might otherwise have. But it'll still be ludicrously expensive because it'll be a beautiful piece of work. Hey, look, this accident kind of overtook the purpose of this video and made it more interesting, if I'm honest, because otherwise I was just going to be doing some routine tasks, preparing the body and maybe beginning to carve the neck. But yeah, instead it turned into a video about having a terrible accident, well, fortunately not one that harmed me, damaging the guitar, and then making the decision to repair it and actually doing an okay job. So the next video will be a little bit less interesting. I'll rush through things. I won't bore you too much. There'll be carving of the neck, there'll be inserting frets. Any fretwork that I need to do, I'll probably do then. You don't really need to see all that. Those are just details that must happen every time. I showed you all of those details when I first put this channel out, and all this stuff was new and challenging to me. It's still somewhat challenging, but I know what you want to see. You want to see stuff with each guitar that's unique to that guitar and makes that particular guitar interesting and different. So I won't bother with the things that are the same for every build. Now I'm rabbiting on, so that's definitely a sign to finish things. Stay safe. Don't stutter and trip over your words. Stay safe out there, kids, and be back soon.